Is that a Kabbalah bracelet? A what? Kabbalah bracelet? Where?
We are live streaming to YouTube.
Is that a Kabbalah bracelet? A what?
Lagging, yeah. I'm gonna put my phone here. It's not on right. We are live streaming to YouTube. Can I stream? Yeah, I do. Wait, what? I just wanted to see if it worked. We are live streaming to YouTube.
Do you have the YouTube studio?
Can I stream? Yeah, I do. Wait, what? I just wanted to see if it worked. How do I like share this live stream so like someone could watch it? But where's the link? Just this one?
Yeah, you
That's
can
it? Okay.
How's it going?
I've been writing so much, but on Monday I couldn't attend the open mic because I had a, and then I'm helping with the legislation, and then there's the video script which I don't care about. We're gonna write somehow. I was up until like 4:30 last night just doing like bullshit homework. Like procrastinating as much as possible, small person productivity. I got to my stats homework that way last night. I was like, oh, what a pleasant surprise, it's over.
I was good to know yourself.
I went to bed at 1 and woke up at 6. So like, I feel like life is changing.
I got 8 hours of sleep. I woke up at noon and I still felt tired.
That's fair.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go to eat. Okay, and a little bit like 4 hours. I was supposed to wake up at 6 and then I slept in my room. I think all of us are like, when we were alive, we're here.
What do we have? Yes, sir. Oh, and then they have touches the floor, you have to start it. So, you need a login name. Yeah. This one's quick enough, but it's a really quick hotspot. So, yeah, you have an HDMI port for this one, so if you want to plug in yours as well.
Yeah, do you guys have the presentation?
I don't have access to that email. I can get those to just sign in real quick.
I can send it to you real quick if you can.
Yeah, sure. I've been meeting with resume other student organizations. The universities in Austin, which is super great to be. Yeah, because it's important. Especially here, it's so easy to feel lost in atmosphere. Like, yeah.
So that's my path to walk. Yeah, just one thing.
Else I would have had it set up already. I'm so sorry. I have little skeleton earrings. I should have worn my little skeleton earrings today. We could have matched. I got some new ones over the weekend.
I mean,
It's going, yay.
You know how it goes.
Were you expecting a different color or like?
Okay.
the link.
It wasn't that exactly. I didn't need that every morning. Like I worked on like. It sounds like some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Should we wait? In a minute? Yeah.
They're just like. Wait, because, yeah, let's see the thing. Hey, man. I didn't say no. Yes, you just, that was so good. Bro, dude, like, literally it's like a small. Yeah, I couldn't really face that. And then my laptop.
Are you guys ready? Getting it close to the door today?
Yeah.
Do we leave it open? Yeah, that one is closer to you. Okay.
Okay, I don't think I'm gonna need the microphone, so if you guys.
So thank you so much for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Victoria. I work at Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center. I'm a paralegal there, and while I am not an accredited rep or an attorney, I am well versed to be able to give you guys this Know Your Rights presentation for UndocuWeek. And we're really, really excited to be able to hold this space with you guys this week in solidarity with undocumented persons and undocumented students in UTEP. So just to talk a little bit about what Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center is, it started 30 years ago when community members joined together and wanted to create representation for asylum seekers, since there wasn't any of that in the border. While there was a lot of immigration happening, there wasn't a lot of people being represented for asylum or have attorneys that could do that. So while Las Americas began with a place to create asylum representation, it is now a place that provides full legal services. So Las Americas is made up of people who protect people from asylum, detention, and also family law and immigration law. So what does that mean? It means that we try to protect or give as many legal services as we can. Even though we are like a small resource center, we are one of the only places in the United States that offers full representation from beginning to end. So what does that mean? It kind of means when you come into the border, let's say you have no other legal status, and you try to apply for asylum, we can represent you in your asylum case, and we can represent you whenever you're applying for residency, citizenship, or if you're ever detained. So it's a full scope of breadth of sources. But that being said, we're a pretty small law firm. We're around 26 people, but we are very scrappy. So it's always like an emergency, but we're just want to say that before we go into fully what Know Your Rights is, that all undocumented people, all undocumented students are welcome to seek advice at Las Americas. May we be offered to help you at like the full breadth, maybe not, but we at least can be a starting point for anybody in our community to seek out legal resources. So yeah, that's a little bit of Las Americas. A little bit after the presentation, I'll give you guys our contact information. But for now, let's go directly into the presentation. So the main thing that we want to emphasize is that regardless of your immigration status, the Constitution still gives you a form of legal right to counsel, legal right to due process, and other legal rights that you're entitled by. So before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about, the reality that we live in today with immigration, right? So while today we're giving a Know Your Rights presentation in the United States, every person is guaranteed some type of protection by the Constitution. However, that doesn't mean that the rights are respected by enforcement. Unfortunately, we usually know that these Know Your Rights presentations advise people how to diminish the interactions we have with law enforcement, but we can't control them. So encounters with law enforcement are really stressful and they're unsafe for many people, especially Black people, sex workers, people of color, and people without a form of immigration status. So while we want to take in like a holistic view of this Know Your Rights presentation, we also want to say that, these encounters are not the safest, and we are trying in this presentation to reduce your risk as much as possible. Okay, so you have the right to remain silent. This is one of the most basic ones I feel a lot of us know. But basically what the right to remain silent is that you don't have to talk to an officer if you don't want to. And even as an immigrant with no papers or no form of status, you do not need to expulge any information that you're not needed to without the right of an attorney. So what this means in this context is that means since we know that there's different forms of enforcement for immigration, right? So it could be a law officer, a CBP officer, an ICE officer, a DHS officer. You have the right to completely remain silent until you are asked to see an attorney. Does anybody have a question about that or a situation that they'd like to ask about? No? Okay. And that's one of the most basic ones. And then you also have the right to an attorney. So what does this mean? Let's say you're detained by ICE. You have the right to consult with a lawyer, but the government is not provided the right to provide you with one. So what's the difference here, right? So you have the right to counsel and you have the right to an attorney, but unlike somebody that is documented or has papers, or however that, BS they draw with people for their rights do, the government isn't entitled to give you one. We kind of, if you guys know the basis of criminal law, we know that you're entitled, your right to a fair trial. In this case, the government isn't entitled to give you, an attorney to be able to represent you, but you do have the right to seek out one. And again, you do have the right to remain silent until you have an attorney present. So, oh, don't worry, guys.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay. Do any of you guys have any questions on right to an attorney or what that means? Yeah.
So I guess in an example, like how, when you're detained, is that when you call for your right for attorney or like, or when you're being questioned like a police style?
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna go into another scenario, but that's two good questions. So let's say you're detained and you're put in a secondary location, right? Whether that's a jail cell because they detained you for a criminal act or whether they detained you for something that's, without probable cause. We'll go into it a little bit now, but sadly, immigration officers can detain you if they have probable cause that you don't have documents. But they need the probable cause. Like if they can't give you that, they can't detain you, which is kind of like a two-step to your answer. But you have the right to remain silent with that officer, and you have the right to remain silent until they let you see an attorney. So right now, after this presentation, I'll let you guys know what you guys should keep handy, which is a number of an attorney that you know or is willing to represent you, and then any form of documentation you have, whether it's from another country that you're from, like a passport or a visa or whatever, even if it's an expired visa, even if it's an expired work permit, it's always good to have those documents. And then for the second question is what happens if they're asking you to speak, right? Well, you have the right to remain silent unless, they have a warrant for something in specific that you have to attest to, or they've already given you the right to speak to an attorney. You have the right to remain completely silent on the issue. Yeah, so you have the right to review documents in the language you understand best. So this is also a really great one that we try to stress as much as we can. They need to make sure that you understand what's going on. Well, and many times, so the sad part is that immigration is a very fickle form of law, especially for criminal and what rights people that aren't necessarily United States citizens have the same amount of law that goes in to protect them. But you should still understand what is going on in this process. You can't, you can't give an answer to something that you're not understanding to. And if they push you, it's gonna be, you can hold that against them later in court whenever they're like saying like, I don't know what happened here. I wasn't able to understand this in English. You need to know what's happening in all moments. So it's always good to know that, whatever advice your attorney comes from or from us, the best thing we can always say is remain silent. You do have the right to an attorney and you have to understand what's happening before you're ever able to give an answer. Okay. And then also with what is good with these two to remember is that, so let's go back a little bit into identity. The only thing you have to give is your name. If somebody asks you, like, give your identity, give where are you from, I'm like, my name is this, and that's all you have to give them. That is your identity. If you have any other documents, you can have them with you, but the best thing is to remain silent. If they're forcing you to give some form of identity, all you have to give is your name. Okay. Okay, so like we were talking about before, if an immigration agent asks if they can search you, you have the right to say no unless they have a warrant with possible cause. So right now we can go in sign by sign with what happens if you refuse the right to a search. So let's say an immigration attorney comes to your house. You have the right to say no if they want to search your belongings without content of probable cause or without a warrant. Your house is a little bit different because it's differently protected under the law. But let's say you're just walking downtown and an officer of any form of law enforcement, ICE, CBP, DHS comes up to you and says, I'd like to search your belongings. They can't do that. If they say, I like to search your belongings because I think you're carrying this, that's a different situation, right? And then if you don't have that, well, you can bring it against them later, right? It's like, I did not have that. They obviously did have probable cause. What becomes different with immigrants is that, again, there are certain laws that protect some DHS and ICE officers to be like, I think this person is undocumented. If I search them and see that they have no documents, I think I can take them in. And in some cases that has happened. it would be, you know, a lie if I told you guys that that hasn't happened and it hasn't been approved. But it's also been the case that they've taken people with documents and then later they bring in the documents and they have them detained for, you know, a week because they didn't have their documents. So the guidelines in which DHS in Texas operates specifically for these types of things are kind of effed up. There's in every state a different type of law, which are kind of called like these statutes that they can go into. But just for you guys to know, here in El Paso, there has to be at bottom line a probable cause for them to be able to search you. Or consent, which we do not recommend you give. Yes.
Is this also true for like checkpoints?
Yeah, we're about to go into checkpoints right now. Okay. So just to summary up what I've been saying right now, what happens when you're stopped by police or ICE? So again, you have the right to remain silent and you should say so out loud. That's the best thing you can do, right? You're saying, I'm going to remain silent. And you have the right to ask for identification from the officers so you know that there are officers. I can't tell you of the countless times I've had clients of my own that have said, I don't know if they were officers, you know? It could have been a scam, it could have been something. There's so many things and not things, but horrible events that happen to immigrants just because people take advantage of their status, that you have to make sure that you say you remain silent out loud and then you also ask for their credentials. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. Does this apply to schools and hospitals? Is there like a different scenario in case when this happened in schools and hospitals?
Are you asking if there's like a protection in schools or hospitals?
Yeah.
It depends, right? Because so it depends, right? Because, you know, schools are, sometimes the law has put schools as sanctuaries for undocumented children, right? So you're not going to expect an officer to come in and ask, you know, these 20 children and them know their rights. But it's such a sticky point because while education is protected for children, even people who are detained in detention camps right now in Fort Bliss get education. That doesn't mean that they're not detained or that an officer can come in. While that's a really low likely cause that somebody in a hospital or an officer would go in asking for papers or for a specific immigration cause, it doesn't mean it's not possible, which is the sad part. Has it happened a lot? Not to my personal knowledge, and I can write that down later for us to give back to YDSA, which I know this is valuable information, and especially for you guys to know, well, what's the probability of an officer coming into UTEP and asking everybody they see to ask for their papers? Sadly, the probability is very low, but there's no protection against it if it happens. So where were we? Okay, so right, you have the right to remain silent. You have to say it out loud. You have to ask for their credentials. And you have the right to ask, you know, a signed warrant before letting officials into any part of your home, right? So if it's your home, they need to have a warrant. I have another slide on this right now, but basically the best way to know whenever they come into your home is through a window, asking them to see their credentials, asking them to see the warrant and to slide the warrant under the door and making sure that it's a valid warrant, right? They don't have the right to rush into your home without being unannounced. And if they don't have a warrant, you have the right to refuse them to not come in. Oh, and this one's also a very important one. So a warrant for searching your home is very different from a warrant for deportation. You may have a warrant for deportation out for you. Let's say that you crossed the checkpoint without papers and now there's a warrant for deportation and they're looking for you. If they slide your warrant of deportation, they show you a warrant of deportation, that doesn't mean they can't come into your home. That's just a warrant for deportation that they could, if you were in a public space, they could deport you. So that's a little bit more like public spaces are eligible for cops and police officers and ICE officers to come in, but your house is not a public space, right? Okay. Okay, and then, yes.
I just had like questions about checkpoints because
Yeah.
well, for my personal experience, obviously, no one really questions me. I don't have to show or anything really. So like, I guess how do you prove that like certain people like cross these checkpoints without papers?
Yeah, so I'll go over that right now, but just to preface this, CBP immigration checkpoints, so those are the ones we're specifically talking about, ask questions to verify someone's immigration status, right? So their only purpose is for immigration status. And of course, they're biased based on, you know, racial bias, outward bias, disability biases, So they need reasonable suspicion still to be able to detain someone. And if, let's say, you go to a checkpoint, let's say you're going to Ruidoso, and you're not even documented or undocumented, you have no papers, and they're holding you, you can ask them for a reasonable suspicion. And if they can't give it to you, they have to let you go. And you can remain silent until you get a hold of an attorney.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll go over it a little bit more right now. Okay. Move on to the next one. Oh, and this one's also an important one. If you have been detained by ICE, you have the right to make a free phone call to a legal service provider. Okay, so recall that. Remain silent, say it out loud. You can ask for their credentials. If you are detained and you understand that you're in some form of legal proceeding, ask to have your free phone call to a legal service provider. Okay. Okay, so back to police or ICE are at my home. You have the right to remain silent, even if the officer has a warrant. That's not a warrant to, begin your investigation. That's a warrant to come into your house. That's a warrant officiated by a judge to, begin a sort of process. You do not have to let police or immigration agents in your home unless they have certain kinds of warrants. Again, the warrant for deportation isn't a warrant to come into your house again. And if police have an arrest warrant, they are legally allowed to enter the home of a person if they believe that person is inside. So in immigration, a lot of things that trigger people's deportation, as you guys may know, is criminal acts or the thought of a criminal act, right? That's kind of a situation where undocumented people are now punished in the carceral system of immigration, but first are put into the carceral system of criminal justice, right? So the way that works is that the criminal warrants, the way that intersects with criminal law is that the criminal warrant does allow officers to come into your home if they are looking for someone who committed the criminal act. So let's say you're an undocumented person and you've been accused of a criminal act and there's a warrant out for your arrest. A criminal warrant is allowing them to come into your home, but deportation warrant, let's say that they also put you on deportation because they tied together your identity, right? That's not the same, right? So there can be different warrants set out for you. And yeah, it's called a Form 1205. And that's again, the one for deportation. So if they show you that, they're not allowed to come into your home. That's just an ICE officer trying to make somebody's life worse. So that's what they do. So yeah, that is the police and ICE are at your home. So what to do when they actually arrive or are at your home? Again, right to remain silent. You should ask if they're immigrant agents, right? Because it could be a criminal proceeding, it could be not, but you want to know what's happening in any scenario. Ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge. If they do, ask them to slide under the door and hold it up to window so you can inspect it. If they don't have a warrant, you have to say, I do not consent to your entry. Again, so they don't have the right to enter your home. So don't say anything or sign anything without speaking to an attorney. Again, so many times have I had clients who have signed their own deportation papers just because they were scared or uneducated in what was happening. And sadly, that's a reality for a lot of people. So don't say anything and don't sign anything unless you've talked to an attorney first. Okay? Okay, so police or border patrol stop my car. So this is a scenario that's more likely going to happen for a lot of undocumented people or all of us in general, right? So drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent whenever you are stopped by a police officer or by border patrol or by ICE. Upon request, you have to show your police driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. That's where it becomes sticky, right? What if you're undocumented? You probably don't have a driver's license. You probably don't have proof of insurance. You probably don't have a lot of documents that you would need. But would want to get maybe one day. So what happens here is that if you aren't a US citizen and the person stopping you, whether it be police or border patrol or ICE, you have to say, I don't have them with me right now. Right? And that's gonna be the truth. And then you have the right to remain silent and see how it plays out until then, until you can speak to an attorney. You don't want to add anything to that. Or you can say you can have the right to remain silent at all times when you're stopped in that instant and don't have that. Because then it's completely up to the person who stopped you at that stopping point with the car to see what would be the next step after that. And you want your next step to be talking to your So if you are over 18, carry your immigration documents with you at all times. There's a lot of undocumented people that have expired visas, birth certificates, passports from their country of origin. So just carry those with you. You don't have to give them to the police officer, but whenever you know you start your immigration procedure because you've been detained, and like a lot of people, it's just a very fickle time. It's good to have those documents with you at all times. Just so in case you do get a hold of an attorney, you can say like, look, I'm from Nicaragua, and I can apply for asylum right now and get out of detention right now for undocumented people. So it's all good things to have, but if you don't have any form of documentation, I would say just like even a photo ID from school would be a great thing to have in order to prove your identity or prove that you're a student, maybe eligible for DACA, prove that you have some form of status in the US. Okay, so then reducing risk. So a lot of what we talked about, I know can seem a little bit overwhelming and scary, especially when, as an undocumented person, you live your life, a lot of it under the radar, and this would be probably the worst scenario that you would have to face, but it's a reality that we have to talk about in order for undocumented people to be safe. So things you definitely shouldn't do if you ever come in contact with a police officer is providing false documents that could disqualify you for future immigration relief. So you can become permanently barred if you ever lie about having US citizenship status, legal permanent residency, or any form of US status to an officer on record. What does that mean? It means that you could later, whenever, let's say you get married to a US citizen, later on, you do a family petition, you apply for residency, and during your interview, there's record of you getting stopped at a traffic light and saying you're a United States citizen with your name. That could permanently bar you from residency. And then what else? So then keep copies of your immigration documents in a safe place. Yes.
When you say permanently, is it like forever, like ever? Because I've known like people in both cases, like they have lied about it, and I like had like a friend that they were actually able to like fix status, and then somebody that hasn't done it in 20 years.
Yeah, so it's definitely fixed. So great question, first of all. What she's asking is, is it permanent, or is it, as permanent as we'd like to make it seem? If you lie about being a United States citizen, it is permanent. But if you lie about saying, oh, I have a work visa, that's something called perm bar, and it could be 5 to 10 years. So sadly, for some reason, they've depending on what type of status you claim, they put it. And then I've had clients that, they have said that they are US citizens. It's on no record, and, they're not perm barred at all. Do I suggest that? No, because we live in a very Orwellian government. If you're applying for SNAP benefits and you say you're a United States citizen, that's going to show up. Even I think if you're applying for it in certain different types of cases, if it can be on any record to say that you said you had a status that was different from what you had previously, and later you want that status, it could cause serious consequences. So I would say be very, very careful with that bullet point if you guys are wanting to adjust in the United States. And another conversation that I don't think I'm enough to have, it's like, what is adjusting in the United States? It's like joining this thing that has oppressed a bunch of undocumented people, and we're trying to find another cause or another pathway that doesn't mean that there's all of these fickle rules to meet. So, I know that me and Rachel are going to talk about this later, but Rachel was supposed to be my coworker that was here. I'm like, there has to be like a space where we talk about different immigration policies, because what we're doing right now is very down vibes, where we're talking about like you have to fit these very strict rules in order to exist, where there should be more leeway for people who obviously aren't doing any form, even if they are criminal acts or wanting to work. So yeah, perm bar is sadly something that does happen a lot with our clients. And sadly, why we have to turn away a lot of legal clients, because they've let us know that, I was on WIC benefits and I said I was a United States citizen. And literally just 3 years of being on like some type of food benefits denies them the ability to get citizenship. Sorry. So keep copies of important immigration documents in a safe place. Try to always keep it with you. Make a safety plan with your family. This is something we talk a lot with clients, especially the ones after we're done with the process of them. Let's say We help them get DACA, but DACA is still something that's very not uncertain. So always have a plan with your family to, checkpoints that you guys are gonna meet up, documents that you guys are always gonna keep safe, an attorney that you've talked to previously maybe, or a friend or somebody has recommended with immigration services that you can trust if anything were to happen, that you could contact and they would answer. Yeah, and speak to an attorney and memorize their number. Yes.
So, are there any guidelines for making copies of immigration documents? Is there any particular, like, it has to be the whole page, certainly, but like, if you're stopped by ICE and you show them a copy, or they, is that sufficient enough, evidence, like, or proof of document status?
A copy of what?
Any kind of citizenship document, or anything like this.
So are you saying that if you're stopped by ICE and you're undocumented and you show them like a United States birth certificate?
No, let's say for documented citizens, right? Like, how so, or people with a work permit or something, can they have a copy of that, and would it suffice?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, so having a work permit, having DACA, having a green card, which is residency, a red card, which is work permit, those are all legal statuses that allow you to get Texas driver's license and all of that, and you should carry those with you whenever. If you have a copy of your expired visa, that's what we're talking about too. Maybe you no longer have legal status, but even having that is showing like, oh, like I have some form of status. But let's say you are, so in this situation, let's say you are undocumented. If you were to show a copy of a birth certificate, a United States birth certificate, and let's say they don't take a note of it, that is still showing that you were falsifying some form of United States citizenship doc, and that can permanently bar you. But let's say, they're asking to see let's say they are pulling you over, you're undocumented. The best thing to do in that case is remain silent. Say, I would like to remain silent. And then if they take you to a secondary location, you have the right to speak to an attorney, and I'll remain silent until I speak to an attorney. That's the best scenario. Yes.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm so like 50-50. I don't know if it's part of the competition. Like, I don't know if it's protected. When you tell your attorney that you are documented, like, can they say nothing, or you have to be like already like working with them?
So actually, so the attorney you call, right? If you tell them I'm undocumented, they're probably going to try and help your case, right? So they're not going to say, hey, this person's undocumented, if you don't hire them. So I think attorney-client privilege begins as soon as you start talking to somebody about your case. I don't think unless they have malice against you, you don't hire them. But I've never heard that happen. But if that's your attorney, or if you just let's say you don't have an attorney, right? And what you're saying is like, what if I call us Americas and tell them I'm undocumented, I got detained? Maybe they can't represent me, but I guarantee you, anybody you call and let them know that you need somebody to help with your immigration case while you're being detained as an undocumented person, would not tell the officers to, let them know. That is something that I wouldn't say through the phone though. I would probably just, call the attorney and say, I've been detained, they want this from me. Can you help me? Right? You're not saying what you are or what you're not. You're basically saying like, I need help in this. I need an immigration. I have this immigration issue. Can you help? I was detained here. I'm detained here. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Cool. Okay, so the 10-mile border. So what we're talking right now about CBP checkpoints. So CBP agents' main reason for having these checkpoints are so they can verify people's immigration status, right? That's the only reason they exist within the country. Officials still need reasonable suspicions to hold you or search for your belongings, and you have the right to remain silent to ask agents if you are free to leave. So how we talked about previously, if they're holding you and haven't told you anything, you can ask them, do you have any reason for holding me? And if they say like, we can't tell you right now, then can I be released? Because you need a reasonable suspicion to be able to hold me here. If they give you one, then that's something that you can know for further on, and you can remain there and stay silent until you can reach an attorney. So yeah, you have the right to ask agents or basis for reasonable suspicion. If they are holding you, and they should tell you why, and if held, you have the right to remain silent and request an attorney. So here's some resources I can share with you guys, or I guess I can share with you guys later. But there's a lot of nonprofits that are here to help, immigrants in the United States that everybody should be aware of. There's a bunch of sites just like this. They're trying to abolish the immigration system, the immigration carceral system that's so interlinked to the criminal justice system in the United States. And Las Americas is just one organization in El Paso that's here for the legal resource for immigrants, but we also are involved with like social workers, volunteers, paralegals, accredited reps. So it's definitely a full breadth that if you have a specific immigration issue that we can't solve or help with, there's definitely somebody we know within our network that could help us. So I know we're running out of time. The last part of the presentation isn't really know your rights, but I wanted to see we could do a show of hands. I have like some slides because what we talked about was really know your rights in terms of like what to do with an ICE officer. What a lot of the undocumented people want to know is also how can I receive some form of status in the United States? Like what are my avenues right now? I can go over this really quickly. I have like family petitions, DACA, residency, and that sorts. And if you guys raise your hands, I can go over that, and now we can go to Q&A. Yeah? Okay, then I'll go over them really quickly. So what we do in Las Americas in our community migrant advocacy program is usually immigration-based family law. And this type of family law is usually for us to get people who are undocumented some form of status. So immigration-based family law is based on somebody who has legal status who can give it to another person in their family. That person has to be a United States citizen or an LPR, and they can give it to their spouse, they can give it to their children, they can give it to their siblings, and there's different rules for all of them. But just so you know, kind of like the ground rule in family law for immigration, if you guys are ever in that situation, that the person who has to grant the legal status does have to be a United States citizen or an LPR. This doesn't mean it's exhaustive of the only way you can ever get status in the United States. This is just family-based. So just for you guys to know.
I have a question in
Yeah.
regards to like getting married with status. I know that, is it true that like it also depends on how was your entry? Like if you had an illegal entry, even if you marry a citizen, then you can still like be punished or like take longer or like having to go to Mexico to adjust status. But if you marry somebody that is military, then you have like a bigger chance to like fix status sooner. Yeah, like, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, of course.
Not that I'm looking for, but. just-
Yeah, of course. No, I think these are the real things we have to talk about. There's so little avenues. There's so little avenues for undocumented people to become documented, and sadly, a lot of those seem to be surrounding around either promoting conjugation in the United States with United States people, whatever that subtext is. But yeah, sadly, there is stuff that even if somebody who is USC LPR bars you, and while I'm, again, I'm a paralegal, I'm not apt to give like legal advice. So the scenarios you specifically put out, I would have to know the full scope of story to back end to actually give you a concrete answer. But what I can say is that, yes, you're very right. Like depending on how you entered the United States, depending on if you've exited since you entered the United States, depending on a specific date, or if you're the daughter of some type of royal back in another country, it could all affect it. But just in the basis of family law, that if you have somebody who's willing to petition for you, there is probably an avenue for you to adjust, unless again, there's those finicky things like being perm bar because you lied about being a citizen. Entry without inspection, which means you would have to probably go back to your country of origin and re-enter legally. So a lot of those things, but yes, in the basis of it, there is a lot of stuff that could like level you up or level you down depending. But since I'm not inept to like give you a specific answer, what I could say is that if anybody has a question like that, you can come to Las Americas for an intake, and we, there is a fee for an intake, but that could be later dismissed if there's financial need. But what we do basically in an intake is that you ask that specific question, right? Like I'm a US citizen wants to petition for me, but I answered this way, and all of these other things, and my family's all of these things, and we can give you a concrete answer whether we can help you with a family petition or not, or what you have to do to get that form of legal status. Okay, and then this is just more information of other ways that you can get some form of status through not a family petition, which is marrying or being the sibling of or somebody petitioning for you. There's these things called diversity visa lotteries, which are kind of biased as well, but it's basically countries that don't have high immigration rates to the United States. People can enter to be put in these lotteries every now and then they get a visa, like just from an application. Then there's also the employment-based visas that a lot of you guys might know about, like the H-1B, the H-3B, all the H's visas that are more for like the tech market, but they're opening them up a lot for employment. So there's those. And what else? Okay, and I wanted to go in a little bit about DACA because that's actually what we believe most people are eligible for. So DACA started as a policy in 2012 to help young people in the United States retain some form of status. What is both good and bad about DACA is that you could have entered without inspection with DACA, but it doesn't mean that it's a form of legal, it is a form of legal status in the United States, but it doesn't mean you can adjust for residency or citizenship. So the people that have DACA right now, they can't, ever be, a citizen. But they do have a form of legal status in the United States that gives them a work permit. If they need to leave the country, they can apply for parole, but they can't enter or exit the country freely as if they would, with residency or citizenship. So what sucks about DACA too right now is that it's kind of canceled as it's being reviewed by the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court. So right now they are still renewing new DACAs, but initial DACAs are being halted until there's a decision if DACA is still lawful. Which really sucks because Las Americas started taking in a bunch of new initial DACA clients, and then as soon as we were going to submit a bunch of applications, they stopped, accepting applications.
You know what happened with the money that people did, like, put into
Oh,
it?
girl, I wish I knew. We fight about it every day in the office. We're like, we should send the applications. I'm like, shoot. What's gonna happen with the money? Is the USCIS gonna keep it? I don't know. They are giving back receipts from what we heard. So like, let's say you have no other status, but you are eligible for DACA. You can walk around with your receipt and be like, try to stop me. Like, you can't detain me. I'm eligible for DACA, right? And even though DACA, they're not adjudicating cases, meaning they're not approving or denying, you can still have this receipt that it's a whole lot more than you had to like stand on as a undocumented person than before. So that's good to keep in mind. Yeah, so I can go over the eligibility for DACA real quick. So you had to have been born after June 15, 1981. And were under the age of 31 as June 15, 2012. Why that date? Because that's when they passed the policy. You have to have come to the United States before your 16th birthday, and you have to have continuously resided in the United States from June 15, 2007 until the present time. And you need to be able to show this. So for every 3 months, whenever you want to submit a DACA application, please take a picture, yeah. You have to show that you've been here since 2007 until now when you apply, which makes it one of the most like meticulous, horrible applications of anybody's life. Like, who keeps record of their life from 2007 until now? But if you've been in school in the United States until now, that's a pretty good thing to, keep on holding. So, and you have to have also no lawful status. So let's say you entered the United States at 2007 and you had a visa in 2008, you have to have not used it for a really long time for you to still be eligible. Because in 2012, you have to have no status. So like no visa, no work permit in the United States, nothing. And then what else? You have to have graduated high school or completed your JD or be enrolled in some form of the armed forces in the United States. And you have not been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors, or otherwise pose a threat to national security or public safety, whatever that means. And you must also be more than 15 years old to apply. So all of these things can make you eligible for DACA. Does anybody have a question? No? Okay. Then, yeah, so here's our contact information for Las Americas if you guys want to write it down. That email goes to our direct email for our administrator. And again, while we may not be able to provide all the legal services we would like to, since we're such a small firm, we definitely are a good point of contact if we can help somebody reach out. Like, we know you're appreciative of our community. Like, I'm a UTEP student. I live in El Paso. I heard your guys' presentation. I would like this form of help. And that will really, push the buttons of our receptionist to get to an intake, to get to a legal representative representative in Las Americas. And yeah, do you guys have any questions?
You do outside of El Paso, like, do we, like, within Texas, but outside of El Paso?
Depends. So let's say you came into El Paso for asylum, and we helped you throughout your whole case, and now we're helping you with your EAPs, and you live outside of Texas. In some cases we do, but if it's like an initial case, we kind of just keep it within the El Paso, New Mexico, Las Cruces area, because we're such a small firm. But we definitely have contacts to like be able to send out. Yeah. We cool? Yay, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, no worries.
No, you
Yes.
can always say, although I'll have your business.
Yeah, this thing.
No,
What?